Hello there, boxing fans around the world. Thank you once again for joining us for another edition where we discuss the Fury Wilder outcome. We were discussing it all last week leading up to the big fight on Saturday night, and I got to say it was a great card, a great evening of entertainment, good boxing, great boxing, and even excellent boxing in the different matches that took place that evening. But I think we'll focus on the Fury Wilder fight and the outcome. And I said it. I said he would, Wilder would have to come out fast and furious and win it within 3 rounds. And what happened? He came out relatively fast, relatively furious, but got gassed. If you ask me, I mean, he was. I think he was just too heavy. Anyway, what do you think, Kristian?
Absolutely. As soon as the weigh-in took place, and I said that the weigh-in is going to answer some questions. As soon as it happened, Fury's weight. Okay, he's got to come in high. He was, as I did confirm, suspect, whatever, bad training camp because he didn't come in as good as he was before. There's one thing being heavy, but he was polite way of putting this, like the body like a bag of milk. It was just. No, he's never, a Mr. Olympia or anything at all, but that was just not quite how he usually is in his bulked up state. Okay, now the £7 extra for Wilder, as soon as that was announced, I was just like, no, I can see why they're doing it, but I just thought that, bearing in mind, I thought he was going to personally think they have to sort of get in there and get out quickly, so the weight wouldn't have been that much of directly a problem, but he's obviously put on £7 on to try and tackle the bigger man. It was only going to take away the advantages which he had, and some of that was speed, but the power at the same time, because the problem was that the power comes from the speed. And even when he came out quick in that first round, it still wasn't. It came out very good, purposeful, the rest of it, but it still wasn't how we've seen him in the past. He looked that little bit slower, and it landed up being a slugging with a slugger, if I want to put it that way. Everything I said, apart from the outcome, but it's very close, basically took place, and I'm going to take credit for the fact that it was going to land up being a slugfest. And
Yes.
that it did. I said it was going to be a combination between 1 and 2, and the 3 is going to come that way, and it's going to end up being a slugfest. I said that Wilder is going to be more effective, and I said Fury is going to be less effective. And that was the case. But the better guy got it. It was very close. Both were down. Great fight. It will go down in history as one of the best. It's definitely a candidate for Fight of the Year. Any weight. Wow. Do we want to see a fourth? I wouldn't be surprised down the line if it happened. It certainly won't be next. But the thing that just amazes me is that this is the fight that people were complaining, that were moaning about. That, oh, we don't want to pay to see this. We don't want to see this fight. Oh, we're watching the fight that we're being made to see because of the arbitration. We just want to see AJ versus Fury.
Yeah.
Really? Nah. No. It's promised, I think, to be a good fight. And as I said to you, and you concurred, that it was the fight that we were looking forward to, and for very good reason. Those two are a very good dancing partner to each other. Unfortunately, it's going to be one of these situations where probably 99 times out of 100 that Fury will beat Wilder. He's just got his number, and especially if he was a bit more fit, and if Wilder was just a little bit sort of lighter, that he was already £7 over the career heaviest, which was the last fight, and this was way above what he usually weighs in at. He just needed to go in there and be Wilder, and I think he should have come in lighter and came out in that physical shape, swinging in the first round, because the problem was he had the very good down in the second round. The second round, I think it was, he had Fury down. Was it twice in the? No, he was down in the third. Then Fury was twice down in the fourth. By the fifth, he came back with gassed. And there was nothing to suggest in any of the previous fights that usually by the fifth round he gasses. So you can only naturally attribute that to the weight gain. It was a shame. It was a good effort. At least Wilder, in a negative way, as such, has got some form of closure. I haven't seen any interviews with him yet. I know that supposedly at the end there's a little bit of sour grapes, and he failed to give Fury any kind of credit or well done or respect or anything else. shame about that. I'm sure it would change. He was just bitter, but at least I feel for him, because it was, there's no way within himself he could have blamed anything else to sort of like give him some self-satisfaction. When then today he was cleanly knocked out. It was concussive. It was absolute. He lost with no excuses, no ifs, buts, complaints, nothing else. Great fight. Fury could have been a little bit better. He certainly wouldn't want to come into that kind of weight with any of the other top guys. Personally, I think obviously how he was in the last fight, just not attributing the good knockout win over Wilder in the 7th in the second fight, but I just think that seems to be his optimum weight, because he was great throughout the 7 rounds, not one sign of gassing. That was perfect. But with them both coming in not as good as they should or could have been in their own respective way, the two ways gelled, and it gave, obviously, a fantastic fight. Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a truly great night of entertainment, I got to say. Something I will say, I saw an interview with Malik Scott afterwards, and he was saying, and by no means is this an excuse, but the Wilder had broken his finger, broken knuckles, had a broken hand, and a broken eardrum. So, and yet was still boxing towards the end until he was finally, knocked out. Again, no excuses. I mean, I don't think Wilder has any more excuses left in his punching bag, so to speak.
Run out.
Yes, he's run out now. He was beaten, and I hope there's no number 4. It will be interesting to see if if Fury continues. I mean, does he really need to continue? Be interesting. I mean, I kind of, the other thing that Fury said was, in a nutshell, having come from a lineal, if you will, a background, a lineage, of bare knuckle boxers, it's in his blood, so to speak. And, he was happy, not happy, ecstatic with the outcome. So I have to wonder whether he has nothing more to prove, whether that's it for him. He can go back to drinking on the beach now and enjoying his life. It'd be interesting.
Yes, but do you think he will come back?
I hope he doesn't. I just don't like. I mean, I'll admit he absolutely destroyed Wilder, not once, not twice. Wilder, on the other hand, has 42 wins, and his only 2 losses are against Fury. So he still has that, to be proud of. It'd be interesting to see even if Wilder comes back. I mean, I don't know what else. He went up against the best and lost against the best again. So I'm not so sure that even, whereas what Fury has now nothing more to prove. He's the champ in the fans. And the interesting thing is too, is what's happening over here in North America is interesting too. There are now these reports emerging, how Wilder kind of stepped into boxing because he needed money for his baby who was born with spina bifida. He kind of walked into the Olympics and surprisingly, even to himself, got himself a bronze medal. So he has this kind of backstory that no one has actually reflected except now. For some reason, now his backstory is emerging in the North American media. And a lot of people have been saying, why weren't we supporting this guy from the outset? Just from a media angle perspective, it's kind of interesting that he's getting more, if you ask me, more sympathy now than he did any time prior in his career, in terms of who the fans would favor going into the fight. Because clearly, where I was watching the fight, that entire place was Fury fans. I didn't hear anyone cheering for Wilder.
Yeah, very interesting. I knew about the backstory. They had it over here, but I haven't seen anything about it since. But it was on the way up. There was I remember seeing a documentary about him. It was quite moving about the daughter. I do remember that. Yeah. About coming back, this is when I think that both will come back. And okay, first off, Fury, I think he'll be coming back because he's going to be more concerned about legacy. Doesn't need money, but it's about this proving something, because you're still going to have the AJ drum beaters. You're still going to have people saying, Usyk, you're going to still have. I think he will want those belts back just to prove everybody wrong and shut them up. With Wilder, I think he'll be back because I just don't think a guy that is proud as he is will want to go out in that way. I think he can come back. How two very draining fights and a very concussive knockdown, how he will come back from that. Will he be the same? I don't know, but I think that he could probably beat most out there if there wasn't any steep decline after this knockout. This was probably the world's number one and probably the world's number 2 or 3, for example. I think it's going to be very interesting now. I do think that I can see about possibly with Dillian Whyte if Dillian Whyte does overcome Otto Wallin. It's quite funny that if Otto Wallin does beat Whyte, then he would be naturally mandatory for Fury. And obviously, if that ever happened, which I don't think it would happen, but would be a rematch and a completely different result from that first bout because Fury was still at that point, feeling the effects of a huge weight loss after losing, was it 8 stone or something? Commendable. Well done, my God, to come back from that. Was still very weak and just see the improvement there in the first fight with Wilder and how he was in the second because he got physically right after this big weight loss ordeal that he'd went through. But going back to Wallin, that would be something that would sell because Wallin did, open up the eye and did push Fury then all the way. But that's what's going to be pushed, and this is what's going to be hard for everybody to get what they want at the top of the tree because it's still a bit of a tied up mess. I don't think in an ideal world, I don't think Fury would want to fight Wilder because if it's going to be more about legacy and shutting up the people which are AJ, drum beaters or Usyk or anybody else that's at the top of the heavyweight division, he would want to fight, and I can see this happen, that he would want the winner of Joshua Usyk. I do think that will take place. I really do. I think that would be the kind of fight that would happen, and then he would retire after that because that would be effectively all boxes ticked. And I could see him walking away at that point. There is still that bout with AJ. Let's say AJ does beat Usyk. We'll flip a coin with that one. In fact, 60-40, I think Usyk will win. But, Fury must be licking his lips at the prospect of AJ, especially having seen AJ's fight with Usyk. I mean, having seen that, he must be rubbing his hands and thinking that would be, as such, an easy night's work for a heck of a lot of money and, as such, a heck of a lot of respect with the legacy side of things as well. Because that would be, as such, everyone shut up. And everyone, especially from an English perspective, everyone to desire about who's going to be fighting until the next person comes along. But that would be all done and dusted and cleared up, and that would be when he returned. Interesting, because right, a question for you: who do you think is going to win out of Whyte and Wallin?
I'm okay. That will be a close one. I've seen Dillian Whyte several times. I've not I didn't see the Otto Wallin fight versus Fury. So of the two, just based now on what I've read and heard, going into that fight, join costs, but I'm hoping that Wallin will win for the reasons you've stated, because I would like to see if no one gets bought out of this rematch coming up between Joshua and Usyk, and there is a fight against the winner of those two, that would be interesting. I don't know if it has crossed the pond yet, this Fury versus AJ kind of thing. I don't think it's crossed the pond yet. I don't think it's impacted the North American boxing audience yet. In terms of whether that really matters. I think what I saw on Saturday night was the reigning champion defeat someone who apparently throttled his girlfriend in a hotel when he was younger. I mean, Wilder just seemed like the bad guy in this story. And so anyway, going back to your question, though, from an English boxing fan's perspective, I can see the pro Dillian Whyte argument. Okay, from a North American perspective, I can see the Otto Wallin. Make it more international in flavor, if you will, from a boxing excitement level, having two competitors from two different countries, because it's, in terms of media, in terms of headlines, there are other sports in North America that command the front page of the sports section of the newspapers. So if you're going to make it interesting from a promotional perspective, then realistically you can't, pit two British boxers against each other and expect a global interest. Anyway, so therefore, I hope that Wallin wins. No disrespect to Dillian Whyte, because I actually like the way he fights, but again, for the same kind of reason that you're hoping that Wilder would win, to unclog, if you will, the heavyweight division, I would hope the same thing happens for Dillian, not for Dillian Whyte, but for the boxing fan, to say, okay, great, Wallin can now emerge again and possibly go against Fury, and possibly win.
This is the thing. If Whyte does win, then he's going to be brought into this. He's British, but he's going to be brought into this British equation of Fury, Joshua, Whyte, and you've got that situation. It all just depends what happens with AJ and Usyk. That is the question. I still think Usyk's going to win the rematch. I think it will be a harder fight. Now, another question I have to you: with Fury, from what you've seen in this improved state, especially for the past two fights against Wilder, you've got to remember is that a lot of people have said, and it's been a fair comment, is that people have criticized the amount of hype and the huge amount of accolade that is surrounding Fury at the moment, because some people are saying, well, hold on a second, all he's done is just effectively beat Wilder 3 times. Apart from an old Klitschko, really, who else has he fought?
Right.
And this is when the legacy, and this is when that side of it, this is what I think that he will continue to shut these people up, because these people that are beating that drum repeatedly very loud, I think he would want to clean up the British side of things, and that would include at the same time the British scene and also all the belts, unless Usyk does defend against AJ successfully. Now, who do you think out of the crop, whoever in the heavyweight division, who do you think would stand a chance against Fury?
Well, that's an excellent question. After seeing that fight, there's not many, and the various heavyweight fights that were immediately prior to that fight, we saw, if you will, the best of the best. Not the entire spectrum of heavyweight fighters, but who right now could I pit against Fury right now? I do like what. Let me backtrack for a sec, because you'd started on another point. Let me backtrack for a sec on what Malik Scott had said. He had, when asked about being brought in, I think it was Tim Witherspoon who actually asked him during the press conference whether or not Wilder was competent enough to hire his trainers. In this case, get rid of Mark Breland and bring in Malik Scott. Malik Scott, in saying his difference in training really amounted to when Mark Breland was in the training ring with him, that's when Wilder was focused on boxing. When they left the ring, if you will, when they left the training center, wherever they were, that stopped. And that was his difference. He kept Wilder top of mind boxing when he's in the ring, when he was out of the ring. It was very interesting. And he talked about the mindset going into the fight against Fury, ultimately, which he lost. But the mindset, he thought, was a tangible difference that he brought to Wilder. And he thought that Wilder did everything correctly at the outset, but ultimately lost. But it was interesting to see what he was saying. So the Fury camp, interestingly enough, and it just seems to me, having heard that comment from Malik Scott about this mindset, it seems to me whenever I see clips of Fury, and again, I have nothing against the man, he's a great boxer, he is, but every time I see clips of him, he's watching a football game or he's having fun. He's, I don't know, like, is he one of these guys who, fight night arrives and he's in it for a few quid and gets in the ring, does his business, goes home, collects his money. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like this mindset thing doesn't really impact Tyson Fury as much as a professional boxer should or would, if you ask me. So I could see Tyson Fury stepping aside, quitting. He's been retiring. I just don't think he has anything else to prove. Legacy aside.
This situation, as I said earlier, with who has he beaten yet? Wilder 3 times, fantastic. Right. And this is what people, not myself, before anybody jumps on this in the chat room, people are saying, hold on a second, 3 wins over Wilder, a win over a 40-year-old Vladimir Klitschko. He needs to continue to be the best in Britain. Obviously, that will be, I think, naturally taken as a fact anyway, if AJ does lose to Usyk, certainly a second time. And he just needs to defeat the other top fighters, I think, for legacy, because if he retired now, he's still, again, not saying this is right or wrong, this is just what, with the interviews and the general sort of feeling out there, I've tried to be on social media more since Saturday night, but people just go, no, he hasn't beaten anybody anyway. Oh, it's going to be, it was all going to happen that way anyway. It's just Wilder and who had Wilder fought and this, that, and the other. He's no Lennox Lewis. He wouldn't hold his jock strap, all the usual, Marciano references with Larry Holmes, etc. People, I think that he is going to want to shut people up, and certainly if that was me, I would want to do that. But I think he will do. I think there'll be a bit of time now. He's not going to be back in spring, for example. I think you'll find that you'll have the rematch with AJ and Usyk. Bearing in mind the rematch clause has been triggered. That was done at the tail end of last week. That was confirmed. So that is going ahead. This wild thing with Aaron when he was saying that they were going to try and pay off AJ to step aside to allow Fury, if he had won at that point, which he has, against Usyk, then obviously Joshua to win the winner of that. That was never going to happen anyway, because if you'd have the winner of White versus Wallin waiting, and hopefully, and they should have been, and they would have, they'd be stamping their feet. Certainly White. I mean, he's got a case, originally for over 1,000 days waiting there at the top as mandatory. All the rest of it didn't get the shot. You can argue a few things on his resume, but that chap has earned his place and his shot. Shame he did turn down AJ that time, but I think Fury is going to be back, and I think for the legacy side, and especially because of just the, I think if he failed now, I think too many people would be, just going through about, the history side of things too much. I think he'll be back. I think Wilder will be, as I said, because if he's not going to want to go out on a loss like that, very proud, and he would probably, I think, still beat a lot of the top guys. I think he'd beat AJ. I don't think he'd beat Usyk. Just asking myself the same question with Fury and who I think could possibly beat him. You're not going to physically beat him. How the hell? I mean, he came in, 19 stone 11, less a lot of possibly a lot of heavy little bits and bobs, but it was approaching 20 stone. Yes, that was a little bit more. Yes, that that's why he did have the bag of milk aesthetic look to him. But he's a near on 20 stone guy. Now, nobody in the light side of this division now is going to be able to touch him, because Fury's always going to have weight. Forget skill, which he's full of, obviously, but weight and reach just to start off with. The only way I think you're going to beat it is somebody that is quick, that is going to be able to see a weakness, whatever that weakness is, and somebody with an absolute boxing brain. And the only person, to me, that is capable of that is going to be Usyk. Oh, chomping at the idea was that. I do think, yeah, Usyk would be the only one that would be able to do that kind of thing. I can't see anybody else punching him out. Let's put it in layman's terms. Who the hell is going to land on him? And if they do, who's going to keep him down? Wilder couldn't.
Right.
I can't see it. You know, one of the young guys, Jared Miller, who looked very good, by the way. That was fantastic. What's he now? 10-0, 10 KOs. Admittedly, that was limited opposition, but you know, he's one for the future. But I think by the time he comes up, I think, you know, AJ's and Usyk's and Fury's are going to be gone, and Wilder at that point. That's sort of the future. But there's nobody I can see, you know, in the top, let's say top 15, that's going to be able to put him down and keep him down, or outbox him, or outthink is going to be the only way. And even then, I'm not saying, oh yeah, you know, if it's push come to shove, I'd have to say that, you know, Fury would win that fight. But he's the only guy that stands a chance. I mean, if you just let's go to the top 5, for example. I mean, AJ, who has a stamina issue against somebody who's a stamina draining expert, now appears to be a Klitschko model with how to or clone, should I say, somebody who can use their weight effectively to drain the other person, as demonstrated well on Saturday. You know,
let me ask you a question then. Do you think that Fury got saved by the bell on Saturday night?
No,
I think he did.
No. Okay, there's this thing that's been going around as well that I saw today for the first time, and it was the situation with the supposed long count that Fury was given. Now, even if the clock or the timekeeper was reaching 10, 12, 14, some people were moaning about 7 seconds. And I'm going to use the Mike Tyson, Buster Douglas explanation of this, because it's exactly the same thing happened there. And this is why Don King, after the fight, immediately tried to go to court to get Buster Douglas stripped of the title because of the long count Octavio Mayron gave on the night. Now, it was the problem I have is that the fighter reacts to the ref's count, not the timekeepers. So let's say, for example, Fury goes down, or as was the case, James Douglas back in 1990. They're down on the deck, they're looking at the ref, and if the ref is 1 second in front, 1 behind, 2 in front, 2 behind, regardless, that is going to be the count that they're going to follow. And when the ref, because they're trying to rinse the count as much as they can, as soon as it gets 9, 8.5, 9, nearly 10, whatever, they're going to jump up to maximize the period of time. That is not the fighters, that is not Fury's problem, because if it was, let's say the ref was hypothetically counting 2 seconds prior, let's say, or 4 seconds, whatever the time was according to the timekeeper or the clock, he probably would have been able to get up accordingly anyway. It's a thing, the same thing I said, the same thing back then in 1990 when that happened. You know, the fighters basically, all the blah blah out of the way, the fighters reacting to the ref, and it's not his fault. And as was the case with Buster Douglas, bearing in mind he hit the deck, and as soon as he hit the deck, he actually sat up and he slammed the deck. He was fully aware, but he was just making use of the count. Whether he got an extra 2 seconds, whatever, wouldn't have made any difference, especially in the Buster Douglas fight with Tyson, because as soon as they went resume, the bell went. And was that the case with this one? I haven't seen the fight since. It was close up. Did the bell go straight afterwards, or I can't remember? I know it was reasonably close. It wasn't like
I can't remember which round it was, but Wilder had given Fury a couple of good shots.
That was the 4th round when he was put down twice.
And if that bell had been 5 more seconds away from ringing, with 1 more shot, I think Wilder would have knocked him out.
I just personally disagree there, for the fact that when Wilder came out in round 5, and this was very clear, he was gassed.
Oh yeah.
So if he was, when he came out for that 5th round, if he was gassed, what would have been like a minute prior, having just put Fury down?
You mean
I doubt, and we never know, but I doubt that he would have been able to follow up anyway. Because if he came out gassed after a minute break, sat down, And
I'm just
the
saying
long count thing, no, wouldn't have made any difference.
No. I'm just saying if he'd have had enough, because he was getting his shots in, Wilder, that is, if he had the time to deliver one more punch, would that have been enough in the end of that fourth round? And I think it might have been. So the question was Fury saved by the bell?
No, Fury wasn't that hurt. And when he is hurt, he recovers that quickly anyway, which is always going to be a problem for anybody. Because if Wilder can't keep him down, which he can't, going back to that first fight when he was picked up by God or somebody, and that was a weight drained or a weaker Tyson. So no, I don't think, just a personal opinion, I don't think he was saved because he would have weathered it. But I don't think with the state Wilder was in would have been able to follow up anymore anyway, because he came out, beginning of the five, gassed, couldn't do anything at that point. So what we'd have been able to do after, at the end of that round, if there was any time, if that was the case. Just a view we will never know, but he looks absolutely fine getting up. How he goes from being, that second knockdown, I thought that was it. He gets up, then he, after a couple of seconds, it's just like, well, okay, I would do it for Wilder. But go over to Carl Hall, who joined us late. We got it wrong, by the way, as far as who won. Bear in mind, it was that close. But you've got to remember, Carl, and the key thing here is, as I said, Wilder was going to come out better. Fury was going to come out not as good. Weight was a factor. I said that I'll be curious to, see what the weights were on the evening, as was the case. 7 pounds heavier. I went straight to Twitter, put on there too high. It changes my perception. And the key thing here is that I said, and I'm just going to jump on this just to pacify myself, that it was going to be a slugfest between the two of them. Combination of 1 and 2 together. We got that third match, and weren't we the winners of that? As much as Fury won it, I think the whole world, won that with a spectacular fight.
I don't think we've discussed this, but this is a good question from Adari. Who do you think would win between AJ and Wilder?
Be a bloody good fight. That's one of the ones I was going to say earlier. Oh, absolutely. So there's still, if Wilder, after those 2 draining fights, is not completely screwed after that, because that was a grueling fight followed by an absolute, heavy punch. He was out. He was, okay, I know going to hospital was a precautionary matter, but that was just a beating. If Wilder is as good, I could see him. I do think actually I could see him beating AJ based on, and he's got to be careful here, based on AJ's last performance. We can only go by the last performance of a fighter. Based on that, I think Wilder would probably win. I do think now in the world it's that the top 5 is something like Fury, Usyk. Take your pick for 3, but I think possibly Wilder, AJ. But the problem with this, who's first, second, third, fourth, some fighters, it's like that good old thing where A beats B, B beats C, C beats D, but A can't beat D. That's that good old styles make fights. And, do you base it just on who would beat who, or who fares up against who's number 1? Or, it's AJ Wilder. I think they're on, as such, similar level, grade, pegging, however you want to put it. But I do think, number 1, Fury, 2, Usyk, 3, 2, which we just mentioned, then possibly White, and then, some of the others from there on. The rest of the positions you can make cases for and against all of them. There isn't anybody that really stands out, or anyone that looks good hasn't at least yet been proven. So all you do at that point is base it on hypothetical possibility. But what's been proved so far against previous opponents and how they've looked in the last fights, there's nobody other than White that really does. Am I missing somebody that really jumps out anymore? And everyone's either haven't, the fighters are either too inexperienced to know exactly what they're capable of, or they're over the hill and on the way down. There was nobody else. Hrgovic, he could do very well. He could be the one that lands up at the top of the tree after all this. But who has he beat so far? There's nothing to gauge him by. As soon as he goes into a fight that's full of hot water, you may simply drown. You just don't know. Flip a coin.
Complete sidebar here, but you just reminded
What do you
me.
think?
I was just going to say something about the disqualification. I think it was the fight just prior. But what did you think about that? Because you'd picked Hellenius to lose that one, yet he won.
Well, this is the thing. He was promising at one point. He had the fight back then with Chisora. He should have lost. He got the win of that one. He then went missing for ages with an injury. Since coming back, he hasn't done one at all. I know he got knocked out. I think it was Johan Duhaupas knocked him out. I think somebody else did. And coming into that fight, bearing in mind I should be, for various reasons, I should be pro him as opposed to Kalnaki. Excuse me, I'm very tired at the moment. I should be pro Hellenius. In that first fight with Kalnaki, as much as he won, he still looked, as usual, shaky on his legs. We lost to Chisora. That was the first one back after the timeout and the first defeat. That went in distance. But he's looked very much on shaky legs, and he certainly doesn't punch with the same authority that he did. And I saw had something, I was doing a couple of posts earlier. There was had something in the back, and somebody was saying about Hellenius is back in the mix with, as much as he beat Kalnaki and is now, I think, more down to Kalnaki losing it. He was just overhyped. He was just in the top 15 when he was in the first fight with Hellenius. I just don't think he's in the top 15, and it has flattered Hellenius with what he has left. And I think anybody in the top 15 would beat him, because with how Kalnaki was, he was just punching just 1-2. There was no urgency to finish him off. Bear in mind, he didn't have to, but it was still what he was doing. I don't think, maybe I was completely wrong, it just didn't look spectacular. Just thought how bad Kalnaki was. How Kalnaki was in the last fight, which he was KO'd. He actually looked better in that fight. And this had just come out. It was terrible. As soon as it started, I was like, is he in better shape? He's not that kind of fighter. Came out and just looked bloody awful and lost. I thought, wanted Hellenius to win. Obviously was very happy with that. Well, we're just on the undercard. I mean, I'm going to say it. Effie Jagber, I thought, bearing in mind, I thought it was a close one with him and Frank Sanchez. My God, what happened there? I know sometimes when you put two fighters together, they sort of cancel each other out. But, my mum was with me, bless her. She was watching the fight. And I said, yeah, this is going to be a good one. And it's just like, yep, on my phone, having a quick look through at things. It was just waiting for something that didn't happen. And again, it's one of those situations that put Jagber in. We now know how good or not he is. And Sanchez, curious one there, I think. Yes, he's probably moved up a little bit because he did a little bit better than what he had displayed in the past, but you can only go by past experiences. And some of his past fights he looked absolutely nothing, then managed to, out of nowhere, just sort of clinch the victory with a knockout that came out from nowhere. There was nothing to show that he was consistent from the beginning to an end of a fight with any kind of brilliance. That didn't happen. And he sort of kind of ran from Ijagba. He could, I don't think he will beat the top sort of 5-6.
Right.
He's not going to get up there. Another Cuban, okay, stylistically different from Ortiz, but somebody like Ortiz that was never as quite at the top, was just sort of hanging around, sort of top world class, just under, just not fighting the right fighter that's going to hop him up there. Let's see what they do with Sanchez. We should see, but that was an awful fight. I was very disappointed with that.
You could not, though, have been disappointed with Big Baby Anderson.
Oh, right? That was good.
But I mean, he's 21 years old, undefeated now, and I'm telling you, in a few years, he's
the one for the future. Yes, 17 stone he was as well, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I do believe.
Yeah.
Quick, obviously a hard puncher, likable, young, and that's got to do
21.
Doesn't have to be any rushing of him.
Right.
This is the next generation. I was about to say like Daniel Dubois, but I think it's going to be these kind of fighters which are going to be there waiting for all this crap at the top to sort itself out, because it's still no clearer. You know, if you go back to one of our early conversations, we were looking for, you know, X and Y to win, and because it's going to unclog the top, it's kind of halfway got to where we wanted it. But then if it would have, whichever way it would have gone, it's still clogged. You know, you're still going to have Joe Joyce wanting he's now mandatory number one. What's going to happen there? You're going to have, you know, White versus Wallin. You know, the winner of that is going to be mandatory number one. You know, you're going to have the IBF eliminator with chap I mentioned earlier, Croatian, him with whoever they can find at the top 15 to go into the mandatory position. It's then what happens? Everyone's frightened to lose their position, and it's no clearer. Okay, Jagba goes down a little bit, and Frank Sanchez goes up a little bit. Okay, and it's just as unclear. No, shame. AJ and Usyk, who do you think is going to win? Just very quickly. I know it's completely off.
Okay. I will imagine that in this time leading up to the fight, AJ will have learned from his mistakes, because I predicted him to win due to his reach, blah, blah, blah. And I was wrong. I didn't expect Usyk to be that good of a fighter. He was. So he surprised me a lot. So now coming around, I think this time AJ will have learned, if you will, from his mistakes, and come out the better fighter and win that one.
Yeah, and if that is the case, then you've got the Battle of Britain. You're going to have AJ versus Fury. I think Fury would definitely still want that, because big fight, legacy fight, and in his mind, and sorry, AJ fans, but quite rightly, he's going to be licking his lips at that one. He will consider that an easy night's work. And absolutely, that is definitely two styles which, instead of, I always thought it was like 60-40 with Fury, but I think 80-20 with that one. I don't think AJ, unfortunately, I just can't see how it's going to happen.
Right.
There's no way. No way. It's going to take somebody, I think, some kind of box puncher, young, that would come up, that's, you know, would be the type that would probably, or possibly, or stands any chance, apart from what I said earlier with Usyk, that would beat Fury, but by then he'd be long gone.
Right.
And that would be for the next line to come through. But Fury Wilder 3, wow, what a treat for everybody. What a great birthday present. But no, great. And I hope anybody that paid out for it, and because they thought it was going to be a good fight, enjoyed it. And the people that didn't even bother watching it because they thought, oh, we don't want to be paying for this, arbitration has forced this fight on us. And then they meet, you know, heavyweight, possibly, you know, heavyweight fight of the year. Yeah.
I was hoping.
Learn your lesson.
Yeah. Well, looking into my crystal ball, I was hoping that Wilder would. No. I was hoping he'd win, but I was more saying I thought the only way he could win is if he won early in that fight. And again, after he weighed in and we saw anyway. So, and the secondary reason was to unclog, if you will, that heavyweight division. So he didn't win. So kudos to Fury. He's on top of the world right now, without a doubt. It'll be interesting to see what happens between AJ and Usyk again. And again, if Joshua wins that fight, again, I think it's more of a British thing. I prefer to see, shall we say, international battles. And that's what Wilder. But the funny thing is Wilder didn't have the support of the North American audience, which I thought was kind of curious. I thought he did, but he didn't. And now I'm seeing a lot of reports to the contrary, where they're now extending sympathy for him. Blah blah blah. I don't know. I don't think I want to see number 4. I don't see there's any need for number 4. I understand your argument. Like, I kind of thought Fury at this point could retire quite handsomely, invest his money responsibly, and start drinking on a beach. Same thing for Wilder, quite frankly. He's made enough money. He's opened up his community centers and done his thing. What more needs to be said about these two guys? At the end of the day, Fury proved that he could beat Wilder, and did, and that shut us all up. So what's next? Is AJ going to beat Usyk? Yeah, I hope he does, actually. Just because I expected him to beat Usyk the first time. So that's the beauty of boxing. You never know. You really don't know.
nobody could you see. You can never say. You can't even say to the night. You just don't know what's going to happen, which is again the reason why we love this great sport. Yes, AJ against Fury. If that happens, I think Fury would hang around for that. And regardless of retirement or not, he'd still be on that beach having that drink or 10. But as per Ricky Hatton, how long can he go on going up and down in weight, etc.? I think he'll be back for one blockbuster, whether that be Fury or Usyk. I think that's going to happen regardless, because it would have to favour Fury over Usyk, but Usyk is the only one that possibly has any form of chance. But we know at least what's going to happen if AJ wins that fight. I cannot not see that fight happen because Fury was up for it before, as far as we're aware. AJ's looked less capable, putting it that way. He'll be licking his lips. Easy money, legacy fight, easy win in his world. And he may be right. And I would actually agree with him. By the way, Carl mentioned about my mother being hardcore. She's 80 this month, super hardcore. But she's got a boyfriend of 10 years and he's just older than me. Super hardcore. Yeah, it's a good night.
That's cool.
Just
there's been
good old mum.
Yes, there's been some great discussions on the chat in terms of how competitive that heavyweight division is now. Actually, if you take away the top three, if you will, you've got Frank Sanchez versus Oscar Rivas, and I saw a couple other comments down below that one. Just in terms of head to head,
that fight will not happen. Rivas is can't remember the date. He's going for the first Bridgerweight contest.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh, he's gone down in weight. He's fighting for the first WBC Bridgerweight title fight. The original opponent was Bryant Jennings, but Bryant Jennings had to pull out because of medical reasons. It's been changed to, another fighter. That all this was happening beginning of last week, telling you the week prior to that. No, he's fighting for the Bridgerweight. He's gone down.
Oh, wow.
I'm not that will not happen with Sanchez. Rivas is good, and yes, that would have been a good fight. And actually, I would have said based on what we have seen, I thought Rivas would do well because against White that time he did very well. But no, he's gone down in weight. It seems that that's the option. I can't imagine there's too much money down at Bridgerweight, like the old cruiserweight syndrome. But I can see it because if he is a smaller heavyweight, which he obviously is, with the clogged heavyweight division where no one's wanted to risk anything, and with how it is, it seems to be a sort of wise move. It's sort of, that way, or if you're a different fighter and you're fed up with what's at the top, you go to UFC. It's you've got to go sideways out of it because it's clogged. It's awful. And they're all frightened, apart from Effie Japper and Frank Sanchez, to fight each other.
Right. Which unto themselves is what I'm saying. I think we have a good year coming up of some pretty great fights in that heavyweight division because they all know sooner or later Fury is going to retire. He will. As you say, if AJ wins and that fight happens between Fury and AJ in 2022, it will be a great fight. But I think Fury will win that one. And if he does, I think then he will retire and his legacy will have been proven.
Yeah. Fury, I think, is just going to fight regardless, whoever it is, AJ or Usyk. bear in mind, the rematch is going to happen with Usyk and AJ. That's going to happen March or April. Then look for the huge summer clash with one or the other, Usyk or AJ with Fury. That would happen. That would make sense, and that would be right off into the sunset, and have 10 drinks or more on the beach. Fair play to him.
That's what I'm saying.
But he will be criticised, and I think he's a proud guy, and money talks, and especially with AJ, you see that as an easy fight. Won't blame him. It's imagine that 19 stone leaning on AJ, somebody that does fatigue, as it appears, very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. And as somebody correctly said, Wilder couldn't put Fury down and keep him down. Couldn't do that. So what chance does AJ have? 0. So that's it.
Right.
Apart from that, yes, what a fight. And I'll get to watch it again at some point, maybe tomorrow.
This is a great era. I do agree with Fury. I think he said, "I'm the greatest of this era." I think he is of all time. That's an argument, but better qualities now than the Klitschko era. That's interesting. But no, of this so-called modern era of heavyweights, I think Fury earned that title on Saturday night. He beat Wilder again.
Very quick thought, and it's something that just came into my mind randomly earlier today. When I was thinking about, who is the best compared to obviously the generation, all the rest of it. I'll be very quick with this. Fury versus Vladimir. Now, we've had that fight. We knew what the result was. But is the Fury that came into that fight, who was at his peak fitness with his bobbing, weaving, slipping, sliding, more effective against the Fury of now, this heavier juggernaut of a movable object that, well, can move, but it goes back up? Which one is the more effective fighter? Which is the best one out the two of them? It's that same question like with Muhammad Ali. Was he better in his first carnation, as Cassius Clay? That's not quite as defined as this time-wise, but Cassius Clay, part Muhammad Ali before he refused to be drafted, or when he came back, heavier. And this was the key thing, because early Cassius Clay was early 190s weight-wise, up to 201 maximum, where obviously when he came back he was heavier. Was he more effective then? And obviously the heavier, slower but more thoughtful, conservative Ali, how would he do against some of the fighters of nowadays? Which one was the better one? Some people say, with the Cassius Clay or the Muhammad Ali, which one? And then start with Fury, lighter or heavier? Don't know.
Right now, I'd argue, and I have to get going quickly. So I would argue that Fury right now is a battleship in this entire spectrum of ships. He's a battleship, but keep in mind, as we all know, one single torpedo gets lucky, sinks a battleship. So, but I think of the crop of heavyweight fighters out there, there was only Wilder who had that one chance of landing that right that we all thought would happen. It didn't happen.
But
Fury got up. He's a tough guy.
Someone is looking after him. That is for sure. Someone is.
He's a tough guy. But I don't like him.
The first knockdown, he went down. I thought, well, okay, he'll get up. The second one, I thought, he's not getting up from that. I should have learned.
Yeah. It was a great fight, a great night. We had a lot of fun, and it's been fun recapping as well. Thank you.
Yep. All the best.
Right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yep. Take care.
Good. Thanks, guys.